Welcome back, everybody, to the Week 7 of the U.S. Smith Sports Talk podcast. We got 4 segments for you today. We got the NFL, NBA, college football, and European soccer. And with no delay, let's jump right into the NFL and our Week 13 recap. The Giants, in probably the biggest upset of the season so far, the Giants have upset the Seahawks 17-12. Brendan, what happened to Seattle? What happened in that game? Was it Seattle or was it the Giants?
I think it was the Giants. For me, Joe Judge just looking like the real deal down in New York. I think he has that team playing really well. Obviously, you see that Colt McCoy winning games for them. I think he has a pretty poor roster, and they're getting wins. I think they're going to get the NFC East. But also, the Seahawks, their horrible defense and their inability to get the run game going is really costing them, especially against these worst teams where usually just a ground and pound will beat them. But obviously, Chris Carson hasn't been playing much. And I feel like they need to develop the run game to have any chance of contending for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but Leon, I'm going to pose this to you because I know you were a little upset. Brendan said that they got the NFC East, but I think you have something to say about that.
Yeah, I think the Washington football team got the NFC East. I believe Ron Rivera is a better coach than Joe Judge, and that D line for the football team is top notch.
If you are not rooting for the Washington football team, Alex Smith almost dies. What was it? 17 surgeries, comes back on the field. Ron Rivera almost dies to cancer, comes back on the field to coach. Even if you're a Giants fan, if you are not rooting for the Washington football team to come out of that division, there is something wrong with you.
Is Alex Smith a lock for comeback player of the year?
He was a lock before. Even if he didn't play one snap this year, he was a lock.
Agreed.
I have to agree with that. I think him just being back in football is great. I think he totally deserves it. All right, let's move on now to the next second biggest game. The undefeated Steelers have finally lost, and they lose to the Washington football team. Brendan, I know you had a statistic you wanted to bring up for this game.
Yeah, for me, this game was caused to them by their drops. Looking at Eric Ebron and Deontay Johnson in particular, the Steelers have 31 drops this season. That leads the league. The next most is 21. So when you have that many drops compared to every other team in the league, I don't think you can contend for a Super Bowl. And if you're in a shootout with Patrick Mahomes, I can guarantee you that all those drops will not get past the Chiefs. It will not get past the Saints. It will not get past any of the elite teams in the NFL. So if they can't figure out the drops and if they can't develop their run game with James Conner coming off the COVID list today, we'll see. But I don't think the Steelers are a Super Bowl contender, even though they're 11-1.
I think that loss was good for them, though. Trying to run in the undefeated season is hard. It's probably brings so much pressure and stress to them. I think getting that loss out of the way, they're going to start to cool down. Mike Tomlin's going to cool them down, tell them we already made the playoffs, so let's just keep going, keep grinding. And I think that loss will help them get better.
It may help them, but it's shown every other team their weakness. They can't ground and pound on the bad teams, which is something that the best teams need to be able to do. Because when you're playing the Chiefs, you need to stall. You need to keep Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce on the sideline. If they're not going to be able to do that, they have no chance of beating the Chiefs.
Remember, they have been without their number one running back, too.
Yeah, that's true. We'll see. We'll see when James Conner comes back. I don't think they'll get it done. But
you guys definitely bring up good points. I wonder about the severity of the drops problem, if that's a real problem going into the playoffs, or that's just kind of like a quirky statistic for a team that's been dominated the NFL these past 13 weeks at this point. Let's move on now to Baker and the Titans. The Browns defeated the Titans, and Baker absolutely dominated, threw for 4 touchdowns. Claire, I know it's been a pretty hot and cold season for Baker Mayfield. What are your thoughts on him moving forwards?
I mean, he's been up and down. I mean, he has cut down on mistakes these last couple of years, but I'm just waiting for the Browns to implode like they always do. Like, the defense has been okay, solid, but they're still the Browns, and Browns fans enjoy it while it lasts because it's not going to last. They're going downhill.
Currently rated as the 5th team in the AFC playoff picture. Obviously, they're probably going to make the playoffs. How far do you think they'll go in those playoffs, though?
Not far at all. I mean, I'll talk about it later, but I don't think they're going far.
Leon, is Baker Mayfield legit?
Baker Mayfield, the last few games, has shown that he could be a reliable quarterback in the NFL. with a good running game, but I don't think he will be the star quarterback that was drafted first overall.
I think not only is Baker legit, but that defense is very underrated. And what they did to stop the Titans in that first half caused Derrick Henry to fumble, and all they did throughout that game and throughout the past weeks too. They are a legit defense that offenses are going to have to game plan towards going forward.
And that running back duo is really going to cause problems, I think, throughout the playoffs in the AFC, especially. Just some weaker defenses, and Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, that duo has been the best in the league. Obviously, Nick Chubb returning from injury has looked fantastic. I think if Baker Mayfield can play like he played this past weekend, the Browns become immediately the biggest threat to the Chiefs in the AFC.
I agree with Claire. There's no reason the Browns should implode. They have a solid team all around. They're playing solid, but they'll find a way to.
I have a question for all of you now. The Browns and the Titans are very similar as far as play style goes. They got a game manager quarterback, and they rely heavily on their run game. The Titans have found success in the playoffs the past few years. The Browns have not. Given those two factors, which team is a bigger threat to the Steelers and the Chiefs?
For me, it's the Browns, because I think that their running game is better than the Titans' running game. With that running back duo, they also have a more threatening passing game based on their weapons. I like Jarvis Landry. I like Austin Hooper. I like their tight end options, and the running back duo can also catch the ball out of the backfield. I think their defense is also drastically better than that of the Titans. So I think if anyone can contend with the Chiefs, which I don't think anyone in the AFC can, I think the Saints might be the only team who can. I'm pretty sure if it's anyone in the AFC, it's got to be the Browns.
I agree with Brennan thinking it is the Browns. The reason is because the Titans' pass game runs off the run game. They run off the play action. As you see, when the Browns took that big lead, causing Ryan Tannehill to have to drop back and make some passes, they were awful. And most of their passes come off the play action from Derrick Henry in this fear of him just running through people. And I think the Browns, with Baker Mayfield, Jarvis Landry, they have that option to drop back and make passes if they need to.
I'm thinking the Titans. They had experience from last year. I believe Mike Vrabel is a better coach than Kevin Stefanski, and I don't believe any team could contend with the Chiefs. But if they can, probably the Titans.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with Leon on this one. I think the Titans have the experience from last year. I think Derrick Henry dominates in the playoffs. Mike Vrabel comes up with a good game plan to protect Ryan Tannehill from getting down in those positions, and I think they could make a pretty good run. Let's move on now to the Jets. The Jets stay winless after a last-second prayer, essentially, to Henry Ruggs, and they immediately fired Greg Williams after the game. My question to you guys, how does Adam Gase still have a job?
No idea. For me, if I'm Trevor Lawrence watching that game, I'm immediately thinking, how can I find a way to either have the Jets trade out or for them to pass on him, sorry. I think he needs to do whatever he can not to go to the Jets, just showing that their ownership is inept to running a winning football team, because keeping Adam Gase on that coaching staff is just a crime to the city of New York, to all of their fans, to NFL fans around the world. They're going 0-16. They're the worst team of all time. And I think that defensive play call to rush all their guys, cover zero, was the worst defensive play call in the history of the league.
I think I do think Gase is going to get fired, but why fire him right now? Why fire him in week 14 when you could just keep him?
Why fire the DC? Why not just keep him till the end of the season?
I don't know, but if I'm the DC, I'm happy. It's early vacation. It's early. I'm out of here. They're firing me anyways. 0-16. They're going to fire the whole coaching staff anyways. I'm out of here early. Then the blitz. Get out. Go off on a full-out blitz. But I think if you're Trevor Lawrence, you're going to the Jets, and there's nothing you can do about it. We said the same thing when the Bengals were the worst team and they drafted Joe Burrow. We said the same thing when the Browns went 0-16 and drafted Baker Mayfield. It's what being the top prospect has for you. You go to the worst team, and that's just part of coming up as the top prospect.
That's a good point. Let's move on now to the Rams beating the Cardinals. The Cardinals have lost 4 of their last 5, and their only win was on that Hail Mary pass. Claire, the Cardinals currently sit at 6-6, the first team out of the playoffs. Is there any shot that they can sneak in?
I honestly don't think so. They're heading out of playoff contention. I don't see Arizona making the playoffs. They're just not that good of a football team at this point. Well, by Kyler Murray may be good in a couple of years, and he's still making way too many mistakes for this team to be taken seriously. Their defense is a shadow of what it was a few years ago, and I just don't think they're going to contend this year.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on this one. I think they're not going to make the playoffs. I think that's a pretty good point to make. Kyler Murray still making a lot of mistakes, still not the quarterback that he can be yet. And so I agree with you. I think they won't make the playoffs. I think out of that NFC West, it'll be the Rams in Seattle. Let's move on now to the quarterback situation for the Eagles, which has been a big question mark pretty much all season. Jalen Hurts took over for Carson Wentz in the middle of the Packers game this past week. Who is the future of the Eagles? Is it Wentz? Obviously, Wentz is on that huge contract with the Eagles that they signed him to a few years back. Or is it Jalen Hurts?
I think this is the worst situation in all of football for any organization because of the fact that Carson Wentz is due $30 million. They can't get rid of him because of the $60 million cap hit that would cause to them. So pretty much they're locked in to have Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts on the roster next year. I don't think that's a good combination because either way, whichever one's starting, just having that guy in their shadow, knowing that there's an elite, not an elite, but a good quarterback behind them who's more than capable of stepping in. Just kind of that shadow never helps the quarterback. And we've seen with Carson Wentz what Jalen Hurts behind him has done. So I think they need to play Jalen Hurts for the rest of this season, but next season need to go back to Carson Wentz because having a $30 million backup quarterback will never win you any games in this league.
Leon, what do you say about that?
I believe like Jalen Hurts is going against the toughest defense next week. So I believe they got to give him a chance this week and then they keep him in for the next 4 games and then reevaluate the quarterback situation in the offseason.
Carson Wentz has showed us he's a good quarterback in the past. I know recently he's been probably the worst he's ever been, but I think without that confidence, if he can get that confidence back, he can be a good quarterback, and I think he'll find a way back into a starting job, maybe on a different team, maybe on the Eagles, but I think for now they're sticking with Hurts.
Yeah, and I think they should stick with Hurts. I think Hurts has looked like the better quarterback. He was able to get Rieger involved, which Rieger, however you say that. They're really good wide receiver. They took him in the first round. He was able to get him involved, which has been one of Carson Wentz's strengths this season is stretching the ball downfield. I think, yeah, they ought to go with Hurts for the rest of the season. The Bears have lost again. Obviously, they got another horrible QB situation. Is it time for change in Chicago? Should they fire their staff, get rid of the coach, get rid of the GM, one of them, both of them? What do you guys think?
I don't think you fire anybody. I just think you have 2 mediocre quarterbacks, and that's a problem because you need a good quarterback who's going to run your team and going to lead your team. I think they started off strong, but we all knew as they were starting off with that amazing record that something wasn't right. They weren't that good of a team, but I think for what the Bears saw coming into this season, they've performed probably better than they expected to. So I think you keep everybody and keep moving on.
Yeah, I think they need a legit quarterback, probably through the draft a quarterback, and also they need to rebuild that offense because it's looking like Allen Robinson is going to leave. So they got to get a receiver. So they need to rebuild that offense.
I think the Bears need to go into a total rebuild, which probably means they're going to fire their coach, potentially their GM. But I can't imagine the current state. They have a bunch of old players who are kind of win-now pieces. They're just not a win-now team with Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles, obviously. I think it's just getting really ugly in Chicago, and I assume they're going to make a change at the coaching position.
Yeah, I'm with Brendan on this one. I think in order to solve that offensive problem that they have, they need to blow everything up, and they need to trade guys like Allen Robinson, guys like Khalil Mack, guys like Eddie Jackson, and Kyle Fuller as well. I think they just need to kind of blow it up and throw their hands in the air and say, okay, it's time to go get our guy at quarterback and start rebuilding this team and getting the right pieces in here and the right head coach and general manager as well. Let's move on now to the Ravens. Lamar Jackson, last year's MVP. The Ravens finished first in their conference in the AFC last year. A lot of people had them as a Super Bowl team, and this year they're sitting as the 9th seed at 7-5 right now. Is there any shot that these guys can squeak into the playoffs?
Yeah, there's for sure a fact they can squeeze in because they have the easiest schedule going in the next 4 games. I believe they should win all 4 games, and they should. I think they're gonna win out and make the playoffs.
I agree. I think the Ravens are back. Getting Lamar Jackson back is a huge boost to this team, and although their schedule is pretty tough the rest of the way, actually, I think it's pretty tough. I believe they'll be able to make the playoffs, and they've shown that they can even challenge the Kansas City Chiefs.
So who
whoa. Hold on, Alex. I need to step in here.
Sounds the Chiefs.
Completely false. The Baltimore Ravens showed last night exactly why they cannot do that. I think Lamar Jackson obviously had the big run. Their rushing game looked really good last night, but that's because they were playing one of the worst defenses in the league. I think their receivers just showed last night that they're not good. Marquise Hollywood Brown, obviously not worthy of a first-round pick. He's proven that now. He's all he is a speedster. He can catch when he's open. He can't make contested catches. He's too small. Obviously, we saw Des Bryant didn't play last night. He said he's done for the year. We'll see how that goes. I just don't think they have any good weapons besides Mark Andrews. He's obviously on the COVID list, so we don't even know if he'll make it off the COVID list this year. I definitely do not think they are one of the teams to contend with the Chiefs.
I've been saying this ever since Lamar Jackson started his success. I've been saying this is something that the NFL hasn't seen before. A quarterback who can, since Vic, but it was even past Vic, what Lamar Jackson did, took the running game from the quarterback position to a new level. But I said once defensive coordinators and teams start figuring this out, he's going to have to rely on his arm more. And I think throughout the year, he showed that it's going to be hard for them if he has to rely on his arm.
For those of you who still believe in the Ravens, of the teams ahead of the Ravens, those being the Raiders sitting at the 8th seed and then making the playoffs as of right now, Colts, Dolphins, Browns, Titans, who do they kick out in order to get in?
Is that a question?
Yeah, that's a question for
those
Raiders, who still believe in
the Raiders after these last 2 weeks? I think the Jets are better than the Raiders after these past 2 weeks.
Yeah, I was surprised that you didn't hear the Raiders in the
playoff
conversation. Yeah, definitely the Raiders are going to get bounced.
Yeah, okay, but the Raiders right now sit at the 8th seed, so they're not in the playoffs, but they're still rated ahead of the Ravens right now. And the teams in the playoffs ahead of the Ravens are the Colts, Dolphins, Browns, Titans. So what of those teams, for those of you who still believe in the Ravens, gets booted out?
Titans.
Can
I say none? I don't think any of them will get booted out for the Ravens. But if there had to be one, I would say the Titans.
Okay.
I'll probably say the Colts.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Leon here. I think if it's going to be anyone, it's going to be the Colts.
It's not going to be anybody. The Ravens are not going to make the playoffs. We saw last night Lamar Jackson, one of the worst pocket passers in the league. I really don't think he has what it takes to be a starting quarterback in this league anymore. His running ability is really all he has. He's more of a Taysom Hill.
Hold on a sec. He doesn't have what it takes to be a starting quarterback?
Correct. I think
last year's MVP shouldn't be starting.
Correct. Obviously they don't have a capable backup to take over. I think next year he's going to get the Carson Wentz treatment. They're going to bring in a good backup, and he's going to get benched. I really don't think he's an elite quarterback. I don't think he's a starting quarterback. We saw last night he can't hit a slant route when it's wide open. He's an awful pocket passer. He's kind of what everyone thought he might be coming into the NFL last year. I think defenses just weren't prepared to stop him, his rushing ability. But now they've contained him, and he can't throw the ball. I think he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league.
I agree. I think he's gonna end up in the same boat as Drew Lock and as Sam Darnold. As we got this guy who can't do any production for our team, but we got no one better. So throw him out there, see what he can do.
Wow, that's a pretty steep fall one season after the guy won the MVP. Now let's move on to one of our last things before we move on to our hot takes. The biggest threat to the Chiefs in the NFL, doesn't matter division, doesn't matter conference. Who is the biggest threat to the Chiefs' crown and why?
No team is a threat to the Chiefs. The Chiefs are going to steamroll through the playoffs and win the Super Bowl. It's a guarantee.
Well, I'm not sure anyone can stop the offense, but here's what I think. I think the Saints can contain the offense as well as any defense in the league, and their offense is very explosive. I think they can contain the Chiefs, and they can run off the clock, try to chew the clock, keep Mahomes, keep Tyreek Hill, keep Clyde Edwards-Helaire, keep Kelsey, all those guys on the bench, I think the Saints have the best chance to realistically knock off the Chiefs if it's possible.
So does Drew Brees and or Taysom Hill have what it takes, though?
I think Drew Brees does. I mean, we all have seen he's one of the better players this league has ever seen. He's a Hall of Famer for sure, and I don't even think I don't think he's kind of falling off the cliff. I think he's still playing at a very high level. He's probably a top 10, top 15 quarterback in the league still.
I agree with Brendan that the Saints, but another team is the Steelers, and everybody is always hating on the Steelers. Despite their good record, everyone says this is not a good team, but I disagree. I think it is a good team. I think the Saints and the Steelers share something in common in that they're really one of the only powerhouse offenses that has a powerhouse defense to go along with it. Yes, the Chiefs have a good defense. I don't think it's anywhere near where the Saints and the Steelers defenses hold, but I think Sean Payton and the Saints have the best chance because Sean Payton, I mean, he should win Coach of the Year with coming out, losing your starting quarterback, putting up some guy who has never started a game, and having him have the success that he has. I think the Saints will be a valuable contender.
I 100% agree with Parker. I think the biggest threat is definitely the Steelers. I think this team is probably the most slept on and hated 11-1 team in NFL history. It is crazy the amount of disrespect these guys get. I mean, you forget how good that defense is. They got TJ Watt. They got Minkah Fitzpatrick. They got talent all over the field on defense. On top of that, on offense, they got James Conner, who's a really good running back. They got Chase Claypool, star wide receiver. They got Juju Smith-Schuster, who's great in the slot. They got Deontay Johnson. This team is a team to be feared, and people hate on them for no reason.
Here's my problem. Just look at the Saints, right? The Steelers quarterback, worse than the Saints quarterback. Their tight end, not as good as Jared Cook. Their receivers, none of them are as good as Michael Thomas. Emmanuel Sanders is as good as any receiver on the Steelers. Their running backs, Alvin
Thomas hasn't even done anything this year.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Michael Thomas has been hurt and he's stunk. That's how he's played this year.
Chase Claypool is not Michael Thomas. It's not even in question.
I didn't say he was, but they have a ton of talent.
They have a top 3 O-line in the league, a top 3 running back, a very good quarterback, a top 10 receiver in the league. I just think their defense is almost as good as the Steelers. There's no chance in the world the Steelers are a better team than the Saints right now.
I'm not saying they're a better team. They're a better threat, though. I think the Steelers wide receiver core, along with that TikTok swag, is a perfect blend of you got Juju Smith-Schuster, who's that deep threat guy. You got Chase Claypool, who's that physical big guy. You got Deontay Johnson, who's that little speedy slot guy. I think Ben Roethlisberger has numerous options to throw to, despite contrary to Drew Brees, who has
numerous options who have dropped the ball 31 times this year, but that's another story.
Yeah, but that's a young receiving core. That's something that can be fixed.
I'm not saying they can catch. I'm saying they can get open.
Well, they better fix it quick if they want to beat the Chiefs. The playoffs are coming up.
They're 11-1.
I think that Ben Roethlisberger has looked like a better quarterback than whoever is on the Saints, whether it's Drew Brees, whether it's Taysom Hill, whether it's Jameis Winston, whoever the heck is going to start for the Saints in the playoffs. I think Ben Roethlisberger has looked way better. And then I think as far as total weaponry that you have to utilize on offense, even though the Saints have Alvin Kamara, even though they have Emmanuel Sanders, even though they have Michael Thomas, I think the combination of Claypool, Johnson, Connor, Ebron, and Smith-Schuster are better than the combination that the Saints have.
And everybody's saying that the Steelers have been walking through an easy schedule to this record. Their division is a good division. You have 3 teams fighting for a playoff spot. You have the Steelers who made it. You have the Ravens who are fighting and the Browns who right now are in. I think people saying they have an easy schedule and they're not a good team to have that record, that's false. They've come through and they've played how they played, and they deserve their praise.
Totally agreed. All right, let's move on now to our last segment real quick before we go. The hot take section. Everybody's got a hot take. Brendan, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I gave my first hot take earlier, Lamar Jackson getting benched next year. My second, Todd Bowles is the next head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next year. I think that would give Tom Brady the offensive play calling freedom that he would like. I could see them bringing in a Patriots offensive assistant. But I think just having a defensive head coach will allow Tom Brady to have more control of that offense, that playbook. And I think Bruce Arians will be out after the season.
All right, Leah, what about you?
Everyone's talking about Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray. I think the most slept on quarterback is Josh Allen. He's going to, in the next 10 years, he and Mahomes is going to go head to head to become one of the best quarterbacks.
Parker?
Phillip Rivers comes home with the Lombardi Trophy this year, and the Indianapolis Colts win the Super Bowl. That amazing defense going on with that offense who can get it done. I believe that it's a hot take, but I believe that they'll find a way to bombard through the playoffs, find themselves in the Super Bowl, and come out on top.
Wow, that is a flaming hot take. All right, what about you, Clay?
I mean, this is tough to say after seeing the game against the Titans, but my hot take is that the Browns, being 8-3, will miss the playoffs by losing the last 3 or 4 games. I think they have the Ravens, Giants, Jets, and Steelers left. Very, difficult teams to play, and yeah, I just don't think they're going to make the playoffs.
But I think Giants and Jets,
right? They get that win over the Jets. I think they're immediately into the playoffs. Just the record is so good.
I think the Patriots will hold them out, though.
I'm wondering how you said Giants, Jets, and good contenders in the same sentence.
I know.
Giants are good contenders in the NFC East. Let's not sleep
their
on
defense. Their defense.
Yeah.
They got a good defense, and they got a traffic cone at quarterback, essentially. It's either Colt McCoy or Daniel Jones. Like, pick your poison, essentially. All right.
You better watch out for that blitz, though, from the Jets.
That's true. I'll wrap it up. My hot take: Steelers upset the Chiefs, make it to the Super Bowl, and then lose in the Super Bowl to whoever comes out of the NFC. No, I don't think the Chiefs go back-to-back. I don't think there's any chance they repeat. It's one of the hardest things to do in the NFL. No way they get it done. And that'll wrap up our sports NFL segment of the EO Smith Sports Talk podcast. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Parker, Leon, Brendan, and Claire for joining us. And thanks for the hot takes as well, Parker. I have no chance the Colts win the Super Bowl. I'll just say that. And we'll see you guys next week.
Peace out.
All right, welcome back to our European soccer segment of the EO Smith Sports Talk podcast. We're back here for week seven of talking a little bit of soccer. And let's move into probably the biggest news of the soccer world right now, aside from the PSG incident, which we'll get to in a little bit. Manchester United are out of the Champions League after losing to RB Leipzig yesterday. The final score was 3-2. That's a big loss for United. Austin, I know you're a huge United fan. What went wrong for them? Why couldn't they pull it through after leading this group for most of the group stages?
Well, I mean, it was just defensive error after defensive error. I mean, Luke Shaw couldn't get it together, and Wan-Bissaka made too many mistakes in the first half. I mean, Harry Maguire as a captain is god awful. He doesn't have the leadership ability that he needs to lead that back line. I think overall the rest of the team didn't even play poorly, especially in the second half. It was just, too many defensive errors. And I think really poor coaching from Solskjaer, not so much in this game, but in the previous games, not pulling Fred out at halftime against PSG and having him be sent off.
That really cost them, because
it did.
Final push from PSG where they got the final 2 goals, that kind of solidified Manchester United's exit. Because
it did, yeah. And I mean, Fred has been one of our most important midfielders, I'd say, besides Bruno, probably our second most important midfielder for 2 seasons now. He was incredible last season, and he's been played very, very well this season. And I just think it was really poor decision-making from Solskjaer.
Yeah, I know. One of the things that really stuck out to me while I was watching a United game, and I know I mentioned this before we started the podcast, it looked like they had no presence down the middle of the field. Down the middle of the field. Like they had to advance the ball entirely through the wings and then somehow get the ball towards the middle of the pitch to get a shot on goal. Like they were either playing it long or they were going up the wings. And Fred, when you have a guy like Fred, he could definitely have established a presence in a very clogged up midfield and, allowed them to advance the ball more through the middle of the pitch than they did. And so I think, that PSG game hurt them in more ways than one. One thing I want to touch on real quick before we move on is the incident with, we're talking about Group H right now. So the PSG Başakşehir game was postponed yesterday after an alleged racial insult thrown at one of the assistant coaches for Başakşehir. by the fourth official on the match. Both teams decided to go to the locker room after about 23 minutes of clock time. They were only got to about 13 minutes of playing time before the incident happened. That game has been postponed to today at 12:55, I believe. Obviously, what happened was shouldn't ever happen in sports. The official probably shouldn't be officiating again. Just wanted to come forth and make that clear that in no way should racism be tolerated in today's society. Let's move on now to that PSG game. I don't know if any of you guys saw it. In the first 13 minutes, PSG looked very dominant. I know one thing that I listened to while I was watching the United game yesterday was a possibility of an unfair advantage that PSG now has because they now see the results of the Leipzig United game. Thad, I was wondering what your thoughts on that were.
I mean, I think you're right because I wouldn't say it's an unfair advantage. I say that the people on PSG and I can't pronounce the other team, but they've responded correctly. And I don't think anyone's complaining about how they responded, but I think it is PSG's almost definitely not going to play Neymar, Mbappe, Marquinhos, Verratti, their top players. Di Maria is going to be on the bench. Why would they if they have the round of 16 coming up after this? And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if they can get in the number one spot. So I don't think if I were the coach, I wouldn't be playing their best players. So it gives them a little bit of the edge where they don't have to worry about dropping down to the Europa League or not. But again, I don't think I would change anything about how that happened, how they reacted, and I don't think anyone's really complaining about that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was just wondering, perhaps PSG's goal difference right now is 3. RB Leipzig's goal difference right now is -1. Leipzig and Başakşehir are the first and worst teams in their group, and they both are the only teams with a negative goal differential, which I find interesting. But if PSG were to win the game today against Başakşehir, they'd end up as the first seed in their group. So that could have the possibility of maybe some people considering that an unfair advantage. But I think you're right, given the situation, given what happened, given the racial abuse alleged by the assistant coach towards the assistant official. I agree. They handled it in the best way possible. One thing I want to move on to now is Juventus at Barcelona. I got a few things to talk about with this game. Juventus absolutely dominated this one, 3-0. Nick, what did you think of Messi's performance? And then again, Ronaldo's performance. He had 2 goals. What was your assessment of that game?
I mean, I think we've all seen Ronaldo and Messi in the past. It's been a battle back and forth. It's either Real Madrid has won or it's Barcelona has won. And now with Ronaldo and Juventus, I think it's just a matter of, Ronaldo was just the better man. And I think that he just came out on top and he was just ready to play that game.
See, I think I'd have to disagree with Nick on that one because if you look at the stats, Messi had every single one of Barcelona's shots on target, 7, which is by itself in any game a great statistic to have. And both of Ronaldo's goals were pens. So Ronaldo looked good. But I think in the dominance on the field, I would say Messi looked considerably more important to his team. And he looked like the better player than Ronaldo that game. Ronaldo came out on top, but I don't know if he deserved it.
Wouldn't you also think that if you're having 7 shots from your whole team, they can't all be from Messi? It is good that Messi did have all the shots, but that means that other players need to be contributing to the offense too, getting shots on target.
Yeah, but I guess that doesn't mean that Ronaldo, I guess, would be the better player, like you're saying. It becomes a team thing. When Juventus, under Andre Pirlo, has such an incredible team, such a strong team to play. Weston McKennie, I think, is a great example of how strong it is. With his scissor kick yesterday. But, Nick, you're right. If you have a crap team behind you, as Messi does, what are you going to do? There's only so much that you can do. 7 shots is, like Thad said, very, very good. But
how do you guys assess the rumor? Because you say that Messi needs help. One of the better players on Barcelona, Frankie de Jong, is rumored to be Barcelona is rumored to be looking to sell him because of their financial situation. So how do you guys assess that rumor?
I mean, I think that's a horrible move for Barca. In my opinion, I think he's my favorite midfielder to watch in the world right now. I mean, I think he does he's like a stronger defensively version of Iniesta and Xavi. Like what he can do on the ball, his passing is incredible. His vision is almost like as close to unmatched in today's game. Like he's just a great passer. He keeps the ball well. I think if Barcelona were to sell anyone, I'd put him at the bottom of the list. Like he's if they're having financial trouble, which they are, get rid of Messi. Messi's a great player, but he's getting old, and you can see it in his game. But Frankie de Jong's just getting better and better, and I wouldn't sell him.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that too. I think that's the wrong way to go. However, I do think they could get a ton of money for him if they were looking to sell him. I think it really depends on how bad the financial situation is at Barcelona. Another player sale that's kind of been in the rumors for a long time now is Paul Pogba out of Manchester United. Where do you guys think would be a good fit for Pogba, and who do you think could afford him?
I mean, I think the big two, Juventus or Real Madrid. He's talked about in the past how much he wants to go to Real Madrid and how much he thinks that he would enjoy his football playing there. It comes down to who can afford him. I mean, like you were saying, I think there's only a select few that could afford the somewhere in the range of £100 million, €100 million that we want for him. So it would be a tough price to ask, but I think they've been saying there's been the rumors that have been coming out that United would be willing to drop his price down to almost 65 million, which is a significant drop off from what we bought him for 5 years ago. But I think, Juventus or Real Madrid, going back to either the club that he performed in his heyday or his prime at, or going to a massive club that Real Madrid is and getting coached by Zinedine Zidane. I think those are the big two options for him.
So obviously I'm a PSG fan, and I would love to improve our midfield. It's kind of made up of Verratti and then everybody else. What do you think the possibility or the realistic possibility is of Pogba going to PSG? Pogba was born probably a few hours just outside of Paris. I'm looking at it right now. A few hours just outside of Paris. He's a Frenchman. He's a native Parisian. What do you think the realistic possibility is of him of going to PSG is for Pogba?
I mean, they have the money. They have the oil money. They can pay whatever United ask for him. Basically, it comes down to whether Mino Raiola, his agent, decides that that's enough, because he's the whole reason that this Pogba fiasco is going on, is because he won't keep his mouth shut. Paul Pogba very rarely comes out and talks transfers, but his agent is kind of a loudmouth when it comes to that whole deal. I don't think he wants him to go to PSG. I think he wants him to go to a club that has a little more history that he can maybe milk a little more money out of. But I mean, PSG maybe not immediately, but I would think within the next 3 years, that there's no reason why Pogba wouldn't want to go to PSG.
I'd say I gotta disagree with him. I would want, just as a soccer or a football fan, I would love to see Pogba PSG. I think it would be almost dominant. The only other team in the world that I could see comparing with them is Bayern right now. And Bayern has some of their best players getting old. So at this point, I'd say PSG would be the best team in the world. Pogba's just a dominant midfielder, whether he's playing well or not. He's 6'4". He's built like a beast. He can dribble. He can pass.
Great header of the ball.
Yeah, he's a great player. So I think he would be an incredible addition to PSG's team. And I mean, if I were Paul Pogba, I think he's putting way too much trust in his agent's hands. And there's quotes from Alex Ferguson saying that Paul Pogba's agent's just horrible. And I mean, I gotta agree. He hasn't done the move to Man United was big money, but it clearly wasn't the best thing for his career. So I don't know if his agent, if I were Paul Pogba, I would listen to his agent.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. One thing I want to touch on just before we go, I know we mentioned Ronaldo and Messi earlier. Who is the best player in the world right now? Is it still Ronaldo or Messi? Obviously, they're getting older, and where does the future, we'll say, king of football, as far as the best player in the world? Who is he? Where is he now? And where do you think he'll go or in his future?
I'd say the best player in the world right now, for me, it's like with it, excluding form, I'd say KDB. But like with the form going on right now, I'd say like people at their all-time highs, like Harry Kane is definitely top 5 with his form. Bruno Fernandes is also top 5 with his form. They both look extremely dominant. So what I think overall, I think it has to go to either Lewandowski or De Bruyne.
That's interesting. Do you think Neymar is in that conversation at all?
I don't think anyone's really including Neymar in that conversation right now. I mean, like, I think he should be, but like, just because he was supposed to be the next Messi, he just really has not lived up to those expectations. So people don't want to include him.
Austin, do you think he's not talked about as much as he should be because he plays in Liga?
I mean, yeah, I don't think that moving to PSG was a good thing for Neymar's career. He probably should have stayed at Barcelona, especially with the past couple of years, the rumors about him wanting to go back. I mean, he's played very well in Paris. I'm not gonna discount his ability because he is a great player, and I do think that he deserves to be in that all-time greats list. I just maybe think over the past season or two, not right now. I think overall, if we talk overall skill throughout his career, he does. But like Thad was saying, discounting form, I'm not sure he belongs in that conversation at the moment.
Okay. I'm going to pose a different question to you, Nick. In 5 years, who's the best player in the world? Where are they now, and where will they be in 5 years?
Honestly, I don't even know if I can answer that question. Even just listening to all the names that Thad read off, I mean, you have all these different players with different playing styles and different teams to support them. So you can't really tell as of right now. I mean, like 3 years ago, we saw 2 or 3 years ago, we saw Mbappe, a young star, scoring 2 goals in the World Cup final. And we saw potential in him. I mean, but now, like, he's not even talked about as one of the best players in the world. So you can't really go on who has a good season in the past year or two, but you just gotta see who's the most consistent within the years to come. So I can't really answer that.
All right, Austin, if you had to answer that, who would that be?
I got 3 names that come to mind, and one of them as an American is going to be a little bit biased, but Christian Pulisic, I think, is a world-class winger, or he's going to be.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty bold. Continue.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of people that have been saying that he has that flair, he has that natural talent and natural technique that he could become world-class. I think Eduardo Camavinga, the 18-year-old French midfielder, plays for Nantes, I believe.
Rennes.
And then, Rennes. Okay, thank you. And then Erling Haaland, I think right now he's on fire. I mean, besides the injury, obviously he's injured right now and he's looking to be out for a few months at this point. But I think when he comes back, he'll come back even stronger and he'll really cement his place in that top list.
All right, real quick before we wrap this up, Thad, your answer.
Yeah, okay. I'd say just going into a little less depth than Austin, I'd say it's either for me, got to be Serge Gnabry or Erling Haaland. In 5 years, I mean, like, because Erling Haaland will still be like 25, I think, and like, yeah, like he still won't be at his prime, and I mean, Gnabry will be in the prime years of his life, so I think he's already a dominant player, so I could totally see him as the best player in the world.
All right, some interesting takes there. Mbappe's name not really thrown around there. Makes me a little sad as a PSG fan. I think Gnabry is an interesting one. Pulisic is an interesting one as well. That'll be enough for our soccer segment today. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next week.
All right, as we jump into our college football segment now, I'm joined by the weekly crew, Alex and Leon. We want to start in LSU. Alex, there's a lot of questionable things going on there. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah, so we don't know too much yet, but LSU is kind of having a tough stretch as a program right now. Recently, there's been some controversy over what Ed Orgeron said about his assistant coaches. He said something along the lines of, I wish we had had better play calling from our assistant coaches, basically blamed their loss on them instead of taking responsibility for that. A bunch of people are upset about that. About a month ago, they had some controversy with a bunch of former LSU players being accused of abuse. One of those guys, Darius Geis. Recently, five-star tight end Eric Gilbert, one of LSU's best recruits of all time, has announced that he wants to leave the program. Reports are that he's quote-unquote homesick, and he missed practice recently. So it's not looking great for the defending champs right now. They have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff they got to sort through. There's also been a bunch of rumors that they're going to have to fire some coaches, get rid of some recruiting directors, and some players are going to have to transfer because of some recruiting violations. So I know Ed Orgeron just recently promised a new championship coming in Baton Rouge soon, but that's probably not going to happen for a while, as they'll have to recover from the downfall of all that's going on right now, which we don't know a lot about. It'll probably become clearer in the coming weeks, but it's not looking great for the champs for the next few years.
All right. I want to jump to the Ohio State-Michigan game, get Leon involved here. Obviously, the biggest headline in college football, the annual game that's usually a rivalry, obviously hasn't been a rivalry, the last couple of years. Ohio State expected to win, but the headline in this cancellation is that Ohio State does not meet the 6-game requirement to make the Big Ten title game, Alex. What do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, so that's that kind of, a lot of people thinks it shoots Ohio State's chances at getting into the college football playoff severely. And there's been some rumors around that the Big Ten is going to do whatever they can to make sure that Ohio State can get into that Big Ten championship. So at least the Big Ten can have one team in the playoff. That definitely makes things interesting, though, because it depends on who you like more for the playoff. Like, do you want a team that won their conference championship? Do you want a team that looks better with the eye test? Do you want a team that has better stats overall? And so with Ohio State not being able to, at the moment, win the Big Ten, there's a big debate on who gets that fourth spot.
Yeah, and Leon, as sports fans, college football fans, obviously, I think everyone knows Ohio State's one of the top 4 teams in the country, arguably the best team in the country. Their quarterback's going to go second overall in the draft. Do you think the Big Ten and the College Football Playoff Committee should find a way to get Ohio State into the playoffs, regardless of if they get their 6th game in or if they make the Big Ten title? Because of, just the pandemic we're dealing with, obviously, they're making rules up as they go. Do you think they should find a way to get Ohio State into the playoffs?
This Big Ten title won't mean a damn thing because they're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to be the fourth team in the country, because I don't see Texas, the 6th or 7th seed, being better than them. They're clearly the one of the best teams in the country, so they're going to be in the playoffs no matter what.
Right, but Alex, if Ohio State season's over as of yet, they don't play any more games, they can't get into the Big Ten title, they can't find a 6th opponent. Do you think realistically it's fair that the College Football Playoff Committee puts them back in?
Yeah, and that's the question that has to be asked. I think there's maybe a debate for them not being a top 4 team. They haven't looked entirely as impressive as we thought they would look this season. But the real debate is whether or not you keep them out. Who else do you put in? Do you put in a Florida who made their conference championship game but lost? Do you put in a Cincinnati? What about a Texas A&M? So it really depends on what the committee values in a team and its resume this season.
All right, let's get outside of the top 4 here. Let's go to BYU, Coastal Carolina. Obviously, Coastal Carolina picks up a big win over BYU, Zach Wilson. A last-minute scheduled game. Alex, what did you see in that game? And do you think Coastal Carolina becomes a college football team to fear in the coming years?
No, I think this is one of those UCF things, but to a lesser degree, where it's kind of they got a good coach. and they're able to assemble a pretty good team for a few seasons, but they kind of fall off after that. That's really what's happened with UCF. So I don't think they're anyone to be feared in the coming seasons. However, this game was probably the best game of the weekend. Coastal looked really good. BYU struggled more than I thought they would. Zach Wilson didn't look as great as I thought he would. And that's kind of what happens when you play a really good team and you don't get to stomp lesser known teams from the middle of nowhere by 30 points each week. So, BYU's motto was any team, anytime, any place, and they didn't really live up to that against Coastal. Impressive win for Coastal. Zach Wilson didn't look as good as I thought he would. Came down to the final play. Coastal made a play.
Yeah, you talked about Zach Wilson. I want to ask Leon. He really did not look very good in that game. He's a projected first-round pick. Do you think he's going to be able to do you think he is deserving of a first-round pick after a poor performance in that game?
I believe I don't think he's deserving of a first round pick. Like the last few years we haven't even heard of him, and this year is his year, and he lost to a 13 seeded in the country. So I don't believe he's worth a first round draft pick.
All right, let's talk about a guaranteed first round pick. Let's go to Devontae Smith, the receiver out of Alabama. I know Leon loves that guy. Leon, what do you have to say about him?
Devontae Smith is Julio Jones. He will be the number one receiver off the board this upcoming draft. And I don't care if last year the LSU receiver won the Benedikoff Award. He is going to be the number one receiver off the board.
Alex, do you see any way in the world that Jamar Chase is leapfrogged by Devontae Smith in this draft?
Oh, yeah, 100%. You could definitely make an argument for Devontae Smith being one of the greatest Alabama receivers of all time. I mean, when you look at what he's done these past two seasons, the season right now, the 2020 season, his touchdown numbers are second all-time for a season in Alabama history, and he could easily leapfrog Amari Cooper for that number. And last year, his touchdown numbers for the season were third all-time in Alabama history. I mean, this guy just catches touchdowns. He's looked really, really impressive. I don't think there's any way that Jamar Chase or Kyle Pitts or Jalen Waddle or whoever you want gets selected above Devontae Smith. I think with Jamar Chase not playing, Devontae Smith is head and shoulders above the rest, the best wide receiver in this draft.
I completely disagree. I'd put money that Jamar Chase has got to be the first receiver, tight end taken in this year's draft. I think he's one of the best receiver prospects in the last 5-10 years. And I think he'll be a top 5 pick in quite honesty. I think you guys are just kind of forgetting about him because we haven't seen him in a while. Obviously, he opted out this season, and LSU just isn't really a name program anymore. Let's move on, though. Let's talk about the Army-Navy game. Alex, obviously one of your favorite games of the year. Who do you think comes out of that game?
Yeah, so this one's taking place at Michie Stadium. Normally they do it. That'll be at West Point. Normally they do it. Where is it? It's either in Philadelphia or it's in Baltimore, one of those two places. They moved it to Michie Stadium for this year. It should be an interesting game. Both teams haven't looked entirely impressive, but that's not really the point of it anyway. You are watching it for the football, but it's mostly about the pageantry and the history of it all. If I had to bet, I'd put my money on Navy. I'm a little bit biased there. But I think Navy will win this one.
All right, real quick before we wrap up here, you told me before the show you had a hot take that you wanted to drop on the end of the podcast. So let's hear it.
All right, hot take. Trevor Lawrence is overrated. That's all I got to put. I mean, I think Trevor Lawrence had an impressive freshman year with Clemson. He's got a lot of raw talent. He's a good prospect, but I think the notion that he is this Andrew Luck type guy where it's the best guy we've seen in a long time is not true. I think he's a good player. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he has a long way to go as far as reading defenses is and making the right throws. He's got a ton of arm talent, but I think he had a really good freshman season. People looked at that and said, hey, this guy's young. This guy is really good. And just noted it threw it this guy's going to be the first pick of the draft whenever he comes out. And so that kind of people stuck with that narrative that they made up about Lawrence.
All right. That's a good place to end it. I like the hot take, and I think we'll let everyone ponder on that one. I disagree personally, but we'll see.
Welcome back. to our NBA segment for the EOS Good Sports Talk podcast. Got a lot of good stories coming out of the NBA, some interesting ones too. We're going to have some hot takes coming for you guys as well. Let's start off with James Harden and the Houston Rockets. Been some controversy over James Harden. He was at a party, I believe, in Atlanta when he was supposed to be at the team facility getting tested for COVID. Brendan, it's pretty evident he wants out. What team can get him, and do you think there's any chance that he stays?
Yeah, it's definitely a scary situation for the Rockets. Obviously, he's the best player the franchise has had in quite a long time. One of the best players in the league, one of my favorite players to watch. I'll be really curious to see where he goes because the difficulty is he has a $50 million salary and no real team in the league. I mean, obviously no team in the league has enough cap space to acquire him without flopping salaries. So I think we talked about earlier, actually, the Celtics could be a possible trade destination just because of their trade exception that they created with Gordon Hayward, the largest in the history of the league. So they'd have to flip like Marcus Smart, the trade exception, and then a bunch of first round picks. But I don't think they want him because he's on a 2-year, $100 million deal, and they have no long-term commitment from him. It's going to be a team that's in a win-now mode. I could see the Nets and many people talking about the 76ers. So I think Nets and 76ers definitely the two most realistic options if they can find out a way to do it salary-wise.
Yeah, that's probably the toughest part of figuring out this trade is his salary. Obviously, John Wall has made some comment. He just got traded to the Rockets. Leon, is there any way John Wall can convince Harden to stay? And if by some miracle, we'll say, Wall convinces Harden to stay, is there any, how far do they make it in a stacked Western Conference?
They won't make it far. I think Harden's days as a Rocket is over. I think Harden wants out, but the Rockets has a leverage here, so it's gonna be tough to trade Harden. But I believe Harden wants out, and I don't think the Rockets will budge to trade him.
Yeah, I think that's kind of consensus around the league right now. Let's move on to the biggest risers and fallers, some predictions for this upcoming season. Brendan, who's your prediction for the team that will rise most as far as record and seed goes?
Yeah, my biggest jump this year, I'm going with the Phoenix Suns. I love the acquisition of Chris Paul, a veteran point guard. I really think he still has it, and I thought he proved it last year. I was surprised the Thunder moved on. I think him paired with Devin Booker, who's one of the best young players in this league. DeAndre Ayton, we'll see how he develops. They've got some young guys like Jaren Jackson, and we'll just see how those guys can come together. I really think they're going to be a contender in the West, maybe a top 3 team in terms of record, and I think they'll put up a fight with the Nuggets, Clippers, and Lakers.
All right, I got a question for you because I feel like just before I pose this question to Leon as well, the one about record, is Devin Booker maybe a little bit overrated? I feel like he's a guy that we've been talking about for a long time, kind of a scorer, but it never really seems to, at least in my opinion, impress me season by season.
Absolutely not. It's just totally not fair. I was in Boston. I was in the Boston Garden when he put up, I think it was 83 points, just a historic performance. There's only 10 guys in this league who can do that. And he is a really special player. He can shoot the crap out of the ball. He's a dynamic, smooth, two-way guard. I really think he's one of the best players in this league. And pairing him with Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, a bunch of young guys in Phoenix, we'll see. I think they're a dynamic team in the West.
All right, so I'll ask question at Leon now. First of all, your biggest riser for this upcoming season?
Everyone talking about the Lakers, Clippers, and maybe the Warriors. I believe the Mavericks are going to shock a lot of people. I believe Luka Doncic is one of the best players in the league, and he is going to bring the Mavericks up to like the 2 seed and be in the Western Conference Finals, I think, against the Lakers.
Do you think Kristaps Porzingis can get back to his old form?
Yes, I believe so. I believe he is injury prone, but when he's on the court, he's been productive.
All right, so now we'll reverse it in a sense. Who do you guys think will be the biggest fallers this season for record?
Yeah, I'll start here. I think it's the Miami Heat for sure. I know they made the finals. I know Jimmy Butler put them on their back. I know they have a lot of young pieces, Kendrick Nunn, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero. But I really think losing Jay Crowder, Jimmy Butler getting 1 year older, and I just really thought they kind of took advantage of a weak East. Obviously, the Celtics I didn't think the Celtics had it last year. The 76ers, the Bucks, we all know they all had problems. I see this year they could be falling to the 7th or 8th seed in the East behind teams like Bucks, Celtics, 76ers, Wizards. I think they have a good chance now with Bradley Beal and Westbrook, Raptors, Nets, obviously, and Hawks. So we'll see. I don't think they're going to be in the top 6, so that's my prediction.
All right, Leon, what about you?
I think the Bucks, they've been in the 1 seed. They show that they can dominate the regular season. But I think Giannis this year, I think they're going to get figured out a little more. I don't like the acquisition of Drew Holiday. So I think the Bucks are going to drop not far, but I think they're going to be like the 4th or 5th seed.
Let's talk about Drew Holiday real quick. Obviously, like an expensive acquisition. They lose George Hill and Eric Bledsoe. Alex, do you really think they get better because they lost out on Bogdanovich? Really, their main addition was Drew Holiday, and they lost 2 solid guards. Obviously, Eric Bledsoe is a top point guard in this league. Do you really think they improved this offseason?
No, and I agree with Leon. I think they got worse. I think they're going to see a drop in record for this upcoming season. I think Giannis is going to have to put the team on his back like he normally does. And I think, I just think they drop in record, maybe down to like a 3 or 4 seed. I really don't have a lot of confidence in this Bucks team. All right. I'm going to put you guys on the spot real quick. Before the start of the season, before we got any news about players, early MVP predictions. Brendan, go.
I'm going to go with my guy, Devin Booker. We touched on him earlier in the podcast. I think pairing him with Chris Paul, as Leon laughs at me, I think pairing him with Chris Paul was one of the, if not the best move of the offseason, because I really think it's going to take a lot of the pressure off him. He hasn't been able to, get into the MVP conversation because the Suns have just been so bad. I think they're going to be a top 3 team in the West. And my bold prediction, Devin Booker for MVP.
All right, Leon, who's your pick for MVP?
LeBron's been MVP every single year he plays. It's just that the voters don't want to vote him. So LeBron James MVP at year 18, I think.
Wow, that's got to be a pretty hot take there. I mean, do you see LeBron? I mean, he's going to have to put some he's going to have to improve kind of on his last season to really kind of solidify himself as a
LeBron is not even the most valuable player on his team. I don't want to hear LeBron getting an MVP at this stage in his career. He's not a top 5 player in this league. I understand he's super valuable, but Anthony Davis
not a top 5 player?
Correct.
Who's top 5? Who's top 5?
Steph Curry, Giannis, Kawhi, James Harden, Luka Doncic. Give me Damian Lillard. I've got a bunch of guys.
Kawhi stunk last season.
Kawhi just absolutely carried the Raptors to a championship. He's one of the elite 2-way players this league has ever had. He's one of the best defenders of all time.
You're gonna rate Kawhi ahead of the king, LeBron James?
No, say it. The GOAT, not the king. The GOAT.
LeBron James is a top 2 player of all time, maybe the best of all time. That's not what I'm arguing. At this stage in his career, I don't think he's the player that Kawhi Leonard, Dame Lillard, Luka Doncic, those guys are. LeBron does not have the ability to put up 50 in a game like all those guys are doing, constantly throughout the season.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that came out of left field. That's pretty bold right there. I have to severely disagree with that point. I think he's still top 5 in the NBA. I like him, probably Luka Doncic, maybe James Harden, definitely Giannis, and maybe a guy like Joel Embiid for a top 5. I don't love Damian Lillard as much as you do. That's definitely a pretty hot take right there. But I think that'll wrap up our NBA segment. Thank you guys for joining us.
This podcast was edited by Gabe Aguero.